Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's show, like all episodes, brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Check them out today at Roll20.net. We're on the social media at SWGM Podcast on Twitter and Facebook. Stop by YouTube, like, subscribe, watch, share. YouTube.com/Savage Worlds GM Podcast. And on iTunes by the same moniker. iTunes.com/Savage Worlds GM Podcast. If you're a fan of the show, like what we do, want to get involved, join Patreon, throw us a buck. And speaking of Patreon, it's been a while since we did a Patreon patron shout out. So here to do it for us, Dustin, the Savage Zealot Smith. Hit it. Oh, he's going to do it while he's drinking water. This is amazing.
So, I'd like to give a shout out to Robert Dubby, Chris Crisson, Mel Primus, Ruben Rivera Jr., Peter Morrison, Andrew Schwilling, Peter Adams, Roger H., Christopher Jacobs, Daniel Lubenschmeyer, Greg Grady, Charles L. Taylor Jr., Chad Berger, Andy Hall, Jody Connor, Remy Bildu, Patrick Greenlaw, and John Stevens. Thank you so much for your patronage. I'm horribly sorrified if I butchered your names. That's that, my English.
Job. That's my job. And tonight's topic. If you're watching the live stream, feel free to drop into the chat, share your thoughts, ask questions. We bring it into the show. Oh, wow. It just sucks to have brain farts. Tonight's topic. Bennies, appropriately titled, I Want My Benny Back. Here to discuss it, the aforementioned Dustin the Savage Zealot Smith, Dave the Rules Maven Scott, great pod, and Chris the Savage Bobby Fox.
Butchered, I would say annihilated.
Slaughtered.
Yes, we have been destroyed. We are hoisted by our own petards.
You can't say that. That's not a nice word, petard.
Captain Petard?
All I'm going to say is, we're going to stop that one right there, Grandpoo.
So, Dave, why are you just shaking your head, Dave? Dave, you're not saying anything. Are you all right?
Grandpoo is very, very disgruntled with your use of the language.
So let's talk Bennies, gentlemen. For those of you who are new to Savage Worlds, just getting into it, checking it out, there's this mysterious metagame mechanic that's a very big part of Savage Worlds, along with the card deck of poker deck for initiative order. One of the things that sets Savage Worlds apart early on and often is Bennies. Bennies are basically a do-over. It's a mulligan chip. You don't like what you rolled, drop a Benny, roll again.
Wait, it's not hit points?
No.
They are not hit points.
Oh.
God damn it, Chris. You know what? I'm going to need you to stop by my office after the show. We're going to have to have a conversation.
All right. I'm sorry.
So let's talk about that. Why is that? Let's just go ahead and embrace that topic for a second. Why is that? Oh, Bennies are hit points, or Bennies are hit points. Because Savage Worlds allows you to do this thing by dropping a Benny whenever you take a wound. Allows you to drop a Benny, make a vigor roll, and if you get a success, you eliminate the wound. So a lot of people look at Bennies, they can say, well, it's just basically your health. You could use it to do hit points. Here's the problem. One Benny can end up soaking 5 wounds, 4 wounds, 3 wounds. So the idea that you can systematically save your life in the game by having the right number of Bennies is bullshit.
So here's the thing. When people say Bennies are hit points, they're not entirely wrong. It's just in Savage Worlds, you have a much smaller pool of hit points than you do in any other game out there. We call them wounds here.
That's what I'm saying. You don't have hit points.
We call them wounds, but you still have 3 of them. The 4th one causes incapacitation, and Bennies can help mitigate them. The interesting thing, though, is they're not guaranteed. You still have to make the successful vigor roll. And the number of people I have watched go down because they couldn't roll a 4 on a D12 is amazing.
And here's a rookie mistake. If you're new to the game, do not make this mistake. Do not burn all your bennies trying to soak wounds. At least hold on to one when you're making that tragic vigor roll. So if you roll a failure, you have a chance to survive.
A Benny spent to avoid incapacitation, or a Benny spent on the healing roll to recover from those wounds at the end of combat, are both far more powerful than the Benny spent to soak wounds.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely.
So, let's talk about Benny economy real quickly. It's more of the advanced. Well, now let's back that up for a second. Presentation. Thoughts on bennies. So, get creative with your bennies. I would say this kind of plays into a much bigger topic of production value with Savage Worlds, because it's a generic system by itself. There's a lot of different settings you can run. If you want to do Scooby-Doo, great, use Scooby Snacks as a bennies. Get a playing card deck of Scooby-Doo from eBay. If you're playing zombies, make it match zombies. You get like maybe gummy zombie, whatever. Go ahead, Dick.
Let's be honest here. When it comes to the very lowest tier, $5 is all it takes to stop the local dollar store and pick up a deck of cards and a little thing of plastic soldiers or bullet casings or whatever it is that can be in theme for what you're doing. You're doing it's a holiday thing. You're getting together with the family. You want to do a holiday game around Christmas. Stop into the dollar store and just take a walk up and down the aisle. I guarantee you there's some small little package of Christmas ornaments that will make great bennies as a little pile in the middle of the table for people to use. And oh, by the way, they're going to be, under $5. And a deck of cards with a snowflake or Santa's face or whatever goes a long way for that. But at the other end of the spectrum, you also have this idea of, if you're the GM who likes to run a lot of different stuff, there's a lot to be said about going out and dropping anywhere from $20 to $200 on a really nice poker set and getting yourself some high quality poker chips for bennies. Because if you're going to run a different setting every time you and your friends get together, you don't want to be running out and buying another box of Scooby Snacks or another bag of gummy bears every time if you can just kind of have the well to go to.
Or do what I did. Spend the $30 on the actual Savage Worlds base bennies. They're the black and white ones. I had a single set and ended up buying myself a second set at Gen Con because in my opinion, there's not enough bennies in those sets because I think they only come with like 20. And so there's not enough. I was always constantly running out, so I bought a second set of those.
I'm going to say that's because you, like me, chronically give away too many bennies.
Well, I have something I want to ask you all about that in a little bit. I'll try to find a time, but I have something I want to kind of throw out there and see what your opinion of it is. We can do it now if you want.
Well, no, I think this is a great topic to continue on, as the production value first. And you're not wrong in that, PEG sells some really great themed, high-quality poker chip style bennies for most of the actual PEG settings. Yeah. They've gone to bat. That's been part of the Kickstarter, and they're available through the PEG store. If you missed one of those Kickstarters, most of those bennies are still available out there.
I kind of take a different path on this one, guys. When I started out with that whole idea that you need to get poker chips because if you've ever played Deadlands, there's this poker motif that goes into Deadlands Reloaded. Mm-hmm. But then I was running tables for like 8 to 10 people, and it just was too much, and people were dropping things, and they were all getting distracted. So I went out to Walmart and I went to the craft section and I got a bag of beads, little teeny beads, and there were like 200 of them for $1. And I put them in just like a little small Tupperware screw-on container, and it works just fine. If you really want to go with a presentation of more elaborate bennies, like fake bullets or the poker chips, or even bottle caps, if you're going to play Fallout, that's great.
I've heard of people using actual bullets. I'm not saying that that's a good idea, but I have heard of people just walking up to the table with a handful of ammunition.
Well, there's something to be said for Roll20 too. So if you run most of your games in Roll20, you got to create your own campaign page for whatever setting you're running. You with Token Tool, a free JavaScript program you can find anywhere. Oh my God, you can go find just a classic, like, I can't tell you how many different styles of bennies I've used in Roll20 just by creating a single benny and then create the deck, and you can have unlimited.
Take that a step further, because most people don't understand how to use your style of bennies in Roll20. So many games I jump into in Roll20, bennies are this entry on the character sheet where it's just a number that people are filling out.
No.
Physical benny in Roll20.
In Roll20, it's very easy. This is on the forums too. So if you go to the Roll20.net forums, you can check it out. It's very easy. You use the card deck creation tool in Roll20 to create bennies. So you would go new deck and you would just title it Benny, and then you find an image that you want to represent the Benny, and you drop it in. You label it Benny. You add another one, drop it in, label it Benny. Put at least 50 in there. I know it sounds like a pain in the ass, but put at least 50 in there, and then players can draw from an actual Benny pile, and you can distribute from that Benny pile, and they're actually picking that up and dropping it. It simulates at the table.
And
bennies.
You can go so far as to build it as a full deck so that you can do things like Deadlands Noir or Deadlands where you've got the different color bennies and whatnot. You can absolutely take it to that level if you want. And I know in at least one of our Savage Saturday nights, we had like 8 or 9 different images in the Benny deck just because there was that much art for the setting we were running. So you can do a lot with stuff like that.
While we're on the subject of that, when you're creating your deck, you don't need to upload the same Benny pick multiple times. You can upload the Benny that you want. You can go to your art file and drag it over. You don't have to always, because that's one of the problems. You'll see people that figure out how to do this, but then you'll look in their art file and they'll have 50 of the same picture. You can take the same picture, click on it, and drag it over to the box and drop it.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. Like, let's say, I don't know how long ago it was. Peg came out with a custom line of Deadlands bennies. And they showed the art. The art's an image. You can search it on Google. You can see the actual bennies laid out. You just go to Token Tool and do a screen grab capture and shrink that into an overlay that's a poker chip. And you could just have the different styles of bennies for the red, blue. You just create one of each as an image, upload it to Roll20, and then when you're creating your Benny deck for a Deadlands, you can give it a Benny back. You can just have it look like a standard sheriff's whatever badge is the back of the Benny. But then that way nobody knows if they're pulling a red, a blue, or a white. And you can, or the legend chip for that matter. And it's a real simple way to do it. It just, the thing with Roll20, if you're going to do Savage Worlds and Roll20 for production value, just read through the forums about how to create macros, how to create decks, experiment with it, bring your creativity to it. I did the same thing for card decks in Savage Worlds too. I'll create a special card back and use it.
One of the interesting things too, with if you're doing this in any of the kind of virtual tabletop style programs, is because you're in control of the art you use. If you are using specialty bennies where there's a benny that doesn't follow the traditional benny rules, you can put those rules right on the image for the benny, so that when a player pulls that up in their hand of cards that they have to use, they can actually see, well, what does the blue benny do that's different from the red benny? versus the fate chip golden Benny. You know, you can put that information right on the Benny itself. So that's just one more step to kind of cut out those, hey, what was the difference between these two Bennies again?
Yeah. I mean, it's motif. What we're talking about here when we say production value, I'll give you an example. Like, so let's say I want to run a one-shot Friday the 13th style hockey mask in the cabin in the woods and teenagers and blah, blah, blah. What I'll do is I'll find pics of teenagers and create a Camp Crystal Lake badge, counselor badge. And the front of it is their counselor badge. The back of it is all their stats and everything for the character sheet. Lay that down at the table and put it on a lanyard. That way they can sit there with it around their neck. Every people look at their seeing the badge, the name, and if they need to reference anything, it's right there. Think about colors of dice that you're using as well. Think about all those kinds of things and just bring some creativity to it. Make it stand out. A little bit of work in the artistic direction when it comes to production values for Savage Worlds, especially at a convention, will get you the title of God.
Or become friends with an art director.
Yeah,
Right.
that works too. So what was the question that you had burning in your mind, Chris?
So I know a couple of Savage Worlds GMs who limit their players to having 5 Bennies at one time so that they keep that flow going, because if you have more than 5, you don't get any more until you start using them. And I've tried it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I would kind of wanted to see what your opinion was. And it's mostly at con games that I've seen them do it.
So I would say this: while it's not a quote unquote hard and fast rule, the GM section does say the average player should earn 2 to 3 Bennies a night through different uses of either role play, hindrances, awards from the GM, etc. So when you couple that with the idea that you get 3 to start, and if you have, say, luck and great luck, you're going to get a kind of capped at about 8 in a session. The idea of saying, hey, you don't get more after that 5th one doesn't sound bad to me. But at the same time, most people aren't going to even need 8 in a night. Most people aren't going to earn a full 3 on top of their starting 3. And I'll be honest, in 12 years now of playing the game with different people, I don't think I've seen that many characters take luck, much less double up and get great luck. There's been a few, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I've never seen it, but it's just not a common combination.
I give out bennies like candy, guys. Like, if people are having fun, then that's sort of like the bell for Pavlov's dog. It's like people start laughing, I'll give them a benny, and it'll just sort of kick things up for a little bit. I think that a lot of GMs are worried that the bennies somehow give the players more power. And I'm sitting here thinking, the players having power and having agency is like a river. You don't try and dam up that river. You just sort of like move the flow around. You guys are like working together, or at least you should be. Being antagonistic and trying to like beat your players down. I mean, you beat them down by the scenario, not by cutting out something that's supposed to be in the game.
You challenge their characters. You don't beat the players or the characters either one down.
Right.
But so I too am on the I just hand bennies out like candy thing. But that's where I said it earlier to Chris is that he, like me, just gives out too many bennies. 20 bennies for a table of 4 to 5 players honestly should be enough, because there shouldn't be that many bennies sitting in front of players that aren't being thrown into the center of that table to constantly keep that benny pool going. Like, the idea of needing 40 or 50 bennies at the table really does probably mean you're giving out so many bennies that you're taking away some of your own ability to challenge their characters. If you're finding you can't ever challenge the player characters, take a look at your Benny economy. Because if I'm giving out 8 Bennies a night to everybody, that's a lot of rolls that they get a do-over on.
My personal opinion is I don't worry too much about how many Bennies I give out. I don't keep a count or a number. When I distribute a Benny, it's for a very specific Pavlovian response. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Bennies, in my opinion, are dog treats.
Yeah.
If let's and I'll just bring this to bear. Let's say I've got 3 people at the table, and I've got 2 boisterous role players who are talking in accents and standing on the table and pantomiming combat. And then I've got 1 wallflower sitting there going, I don't know, this is really, really weird. And that player, in a moment, goes, and I shout, "Hurrah, Benny!" Immediate Benny, because I want to reinforce, do more of that. Do more of that. Do more of that. We need more of that from you. That's why I give out Bennies. Or if they're playing their hindrances, put themselves intentionally in situations and challenging themselves by. I've had players go, my hindrance for being arrogant is leading my actions at this moment. You're a dick. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start antagonizing this guy because I have arrogant. I heard you. Here's your Benny. I worry more about. I don't worry so much about how many people at the table have Bennies or how many. What I do is hand them out for things that I want them to do to reinforce the game. More than anything else, I make sure that the game eats the Bennies by using rules like, I don't know, cover, unstable platform, multiple actions. Oh, you're going to quick draw? Okay. Doing things like encourage them to use wild attack so their parry is down by 2 on their next action. That's what I'm saying. I try to use more of the rules in the game to foster that Benny economy and let the game just challenge the player without having to worry about coming up with anything super spectacular to challenge the player. But I say reinforce the behaviors you want at the table. Like, if you don't want everybody cutting Monty Python jokes in your serious zombie apocalypse game, do not hand out Bennies when they do it.
Yeah, very, very true. And there's a few things that can help, obviously, with that Benny economy, and one is Joker's Wild, which is a setting rule that almost everybody I know uses anyway to reinforce that Benny economy and keep it going for those GMs who forget to hand them out.
It's uncomfortable to not use Joker's Wild with most Savages because that Joker comes up and everyone at the table starts talking about where's my Benny?
Yeah, where's my Benny?
Right.
I'll put it this way. In Dead End, because it's a survival horror, guess what setting rule's not in there? There is no Joker's Wild. And the first time people come in and do, woo, Joker, we all get a Benny. What? No, you don't. What?
With that said, I think we on this show and the community as a whole have talked quite a bit about the whole cinematic, pulpy feel of the game. Bennies fuel that. The idea that you could take a shotgun blast to the face and come away unscathed is because you had a Benny to spend to soak that wound. Otherwise, a shotgun blast to the face, especially at close range, most characters don't survive 3d6 plus 4 damage. I'm just saying.
It's pretty effective against most creatures, including the undead. Yeah, no, I think, but I think like a lot of GMs don't realize that in that situation, you're not getting shot in the face. Like the Benny can actually sort of rewrite the history. Like you sort of like skirt it, or you step to the side and you catch some of the muzzle flash instead of the actual shot. I think that's the general idea, but it does definitely change. It rewrites history. Like it's like kind of in the pulps how you'll see at the end of the show the car goes over the cliff but in the very next episode, you're seeing the exact same thing, but then it quick cuts, and the guy just jumps out of the car, and then it goes back to the car going over the cliff. That's kind of what I feel like happens in that situation.
Yeah, Carl Kendrick put together a good one. I just want to bring it up here. If someone does something cool at the table, someone else, like they just say, I nominate them for a Benny, and if we all agree, they get one. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I do that all the time. If people say, don't they deserve a Benny? Yeah, give them a Benny.
We've suggested that you can oftentimes just, have it as a rule that, anybody can reach into the Benny pool to award a Benny to other players. And if people are abusing that, you can limit it to, once a night. Right. You can award a Benny to somebody else or whatnot. But you absolutely can take the pressure off yourself as the GM to be the one having to remember that, to just say, there's this big-ass pile of Bennies in the middle of the table. When you role-play a hindrance, take one. When you see somebody do something cool, hand them one. You can make it more of a community effort. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great thing with Savage Worlds is we all know the rules because it's not 9,000 books of expanded rules. So that, you don't need one person to be the rules guy at the table. Everyone can know the 200 pages of rules that it takes to run Savage Worlds.
Well, I'll say this too. If you want to, here's another example I'm talking about with use the game to burn Bennies. Let's say you got a group is getting ready to head into a battle that you've planned for them, and they're coming around a corner. They're about to be ambushed. Instead of doing the ambush rule, just announce at the table, hey, everybody give me a notice roll to see the 5 thugs waiting around the corner to jump your ass. Mm-hmm. Watch the Bennies burn.
Oh, yeah. If you tell players what a dice roll is for, the offshoot of this is, 1, they know when it's important. 2, the next time you don't tell them what it's for, they are pissed scared that it's worse.
Yes.
So they will really burn Bennies on that roll.
Yeah, if they want to do something spectacular too, like I want to break down the door. All right. Give me a strength roll, get a raise, and the door comes down on its hinges. Set the level.
That raise, and they will burn Bennies to get there too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. With I think with most doors, I think it's actually 10 toughness if you guys are like out there figuring it out. But then heavier doors get more protection.
Right, but they only have a parry of 2.
Trying to attack it.
Yeah. I know.
If it's just I want to kick the door down, it's a strength roll, and the door is kicked open. If you want to kick it off the hinges, you need a raise. But yeah, you can kick a door in with a strength roll.
Right.
No, I think that again, on the topic that Chris brought here is there is a point where you've awarded too many. I think we've all been at the table when at the end of the night someone has 6 or 8 Bennies sitting in front of them. And you go, well, did they just never have an opportunity to do cool shit? Were they never challenged? Or did the GM hand out too many? And I think you can run the risk of you cut down on how often they try to do cool stuff and increase how often they try to do funny stuff. If that's what you're, if someone does something and everybody at the table laughs and you give a Benny, what ends up happening by the end of the night is you've got a game that's less about the characters doing awesome stuff and everyone's trying to do the next slapstick funny thing to get the Benny. Because again, it's that dog treat. You've reinforced that behavior. And at that point, they're performing for the GM for Bennies that they don't even really need. So I think that's where that balance comes in, is it's not about making a rule that they can only have so many in front of them as much as be mindful of how many Bennies are out there at your table and throw some additional challenges at them. Use the whole rule book, you guys were trying to get over the pass in the middle of the night. Well, I'm going to need a penalty on all of your climbing rolls because it's nighttime. And then I'm going to have a cold weather resistance vigor roll because of the cold weather hazard. Those are things that I can suddenly throw in as additional challenges to that scene, because I've noticed everybody's got 8 bennies at the table and no one's doing anything really cool. No one's trying to do oh, well, I build a travois so that we can get the wounded guy over the summit. No, they're all going, oh, well, I'll just make the roll. Or they're not even making rolls because you're not asking for them.
I'll tell you my favorite is a dirty GM trick. Are you happy with that? That's my favorite trick. Whenever they make a roll, okay, so that's a raise. Are you happy with that?
What do you mean?
Almost.
What do you mean? Am I happy with that?
Do you want to re-roll? Yeah, I think I will. I call it the Betty bait. Are you happy with that?
The best scenario for this one is always opposed rolls, where the player character is the acting character and therefore has to roll first. They're setting that target. Remind them, you're setting the target for the opponent. And all of a sudden, it doesn't matter. A 12 isn't high enough. They will drop a Benny to try to get a 19.
So, and that's what I mean. There's ways if you just run the game naturally, like you're supposed to, with rules as written, and just remind players of the rules as written, they'll burn through bennies. You don't have to worry about, well, am I handing out too many, too often, too soon in the adventure? Nah, they're just bennies.
So let's talk about the other end of this spectrum, and that is not just when are you handing out too few, but when do you need to hand out only a few? Because I think that's the more advanced side of that topic, is like, oh, our theme tonight is you're going to get up against Cthulhu. I'm not handing out bennies for a wisecrack. I'm not handing out bennies for anything that breaks the theme. But I'm also not giving out too many bennies in total, because I know going into this, I want this to be a horrific scene for the player characters. I don't want you being able to succeed at a double backflip off the banister that puts, 2 rounds in the head of somebody coming through the door. No, that's not supposed to happen in this game.
I'll say this too. Another thing you can do if you're running especially with horror, or if you're running a horror setting, let's say you're going to run a three-part adventure. It's all one session. No bennies at the end. You don't go, okay, everybody turn in your bennies and start fresh again for next session. Go, okay, we're going to stop it right there. We're going to stop in the middle of the scene on a cliffhanger. Everybody remember how many bennies you have. That's how many we're going to start with next time.
I have seen veteran role players who go white in the face when they find out at the end of a session that they're not getting to turn in bennies, because they go, wait a minute, I already spent 2 of them. I only have 1 left. What do you mean this is my Benny pool for next week?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
shit. Oh, shit.
Now, I will say that really only works if you're getting together at least, I'd say, about twice a month. Otherwise, it becomes a nightmare to remember who had what bennies, or adventure cards if you're using the adventure deck, etc. There's a lot of tracking that goes on with that if you're not meeting fairly often to be able to make that possible.
So I'm glad you brought up adventure decks. Let's talk real quick about adventure deck. Those are bennies. At the end of the day, a lot of them add a +2. A lot of them give you a free reroll. They are game-breaking events and opportunities and actions. Well, I don't want to say game-breaking. That's maybe taking a little bit too far.
Well,
but they're definitely giving you an advantage.
I would say they do give a game-breaking.
They are game-tweaking.
They absolutely can break the edge. And I think I have heard people say they want to use, adventure deck cards as bennies before. They just full on, you draw however many bennies you have in cards, but you still only get the normal number of plays per night. But you can spend it when you use a benny, you're throwing out a card. I've heard people say they wanted to do that. I've heard people equate the two. There is a card in the deck that just simply says this card is an additional Benny. That is the only card, in my opinion, that is equal to a Benny. Everything else in that deck is more powerful. Just my thought. I really do think that the adventure cards are a step above Bennies in what they allow the players to do.
There is actually Bullseye lets you hit with a raise. Parlay lets you stop combat to start talking. What is it?
Ace lets you just automatically succeed with a raise, no matter what the roll is, before rolling. You just play that card, and you don't have to worry about whether or not you rolled high enough. It can automatically. It's an ace.
Right. There are so many of those. If you have the right card, one of them lets you come back from the dead effectively. Like if you're incapacitated, you can drop that card and you just jump up and you're fine. Like somehow you're back from the dead. There's some where you can actually take NPCs and turn them into like love interest or recurring characters.
There's one that's a dream sequence. It turns the preceding so many minutes or a scene into a dream sequence, and you rerun time. I mean, again, these things are a bit more powerful than a Benny, in my opinion.
There's the story where it's Dave, I think you told this one. It's like where you're on the flood and you're stranded and you have to go through the railroad tracks, but you played a stagecoach appears, and you're just like, well,
I had the card, and I specifically, like, we were playing in Roll20, so I used the whisper command, and I just told Jared, like, I have this card that I'm not using tonight, because if I do, we're no longer following the plot point campaign.
Go ahead, Chris.
I say that's part of the reason why, I mean, for me, running all the plot points and stuff, that's one of the reasons why I don't use those cards. I tried for a while, and I just, it just wasn't for me.
Oh, I think you could still get away with using them, Chris, but it would take you going through and editing the deck a lot. You would have to pull out all the cards.
I guess that's true.
Breaking based on the scenario you're running. But okay, so this is a bit off topic because we're getting into the adventure deck and plot points, but that is a level of prep that I personally don't want to have to do.
Exactly, I don't want to do that. I don't
want to have to read the scenario, figure out which of the cards in the deck don't work with that scenario or could be used to break it, and then, pull them out. That's, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of the adventure deck. I really am, for one reason only. It forces you to become a better improv GM.
Yep.
Because all of a sudden there's what?
That's true.
Oh, god damn, how do I make this fit into what's going on right now? So the adventure deck will do that. What I think is funny as shit is watching players collude with each other about the adventure deck cards they've got. I've got this card. I think I got this card that will let us win this battle. What card do you have? Let's trade.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things I enjoy about the adventure deck is watching the players sit there and try to trade with each other and figure out when to play the right card. Hey, everybody, it was just a dream in case it saves us tonight. Just so you know.
Or you get that moment in game where the character's back is up against the wall and it becomes the conversation. Does anyone have a card that gets us out of it?
Yeah. Anybody have a card that can help me and save me?
You get some really interesting meta game moments that, again, I honestly do believe Savage Worlds is probably one of the games that enforces that meta play, that forces players to think kind of outside of the game world box, which for, some people, they think that breaks immersion. But for me, it really does kind of set the tone of, no, I'm sitting at a table with my friends doing something cool, and I get to think in that terms, along with letting my imagination be immersed in the game world. So I think there's a lot of benefit there. But to bring this back around to Bennies, I think the other thing I've seen people try to do and I see this all the time. We talked about it a little bit in the green room. Is this idea of, well, I'm going to create this great setting rule that means if you spend a Benny, you get narrative control of the scene. Fuck! Stop this shit. Players shouldn't have to spend a Benny to get narrative control of the table. They're at your table. They have agency. They have narrative control. Stop hoarding that shit behind the GM screen. Stop making them pay resources to do what they came to your table to do.
And I'll throw this one on the top of that fire as well. Stop with the spend a Benny for an automatic success. Make them roll and spend to re-roll.
You guys are, that's playing Fate.
Yeah. I've never heard of anybody using a Benny to say it's an auto success. That would not fly with me.
Yeah, that's a Fate point. That is playing Fate to invoke an aspect, and they're both universal systems. They're both fun in their own right, but Bennies don't make an auto success like a Fate point.
So, what's behind that? Is it just a fear of making the players take the detour because they failed on a roll? Is it just a fear of telling a different story because of a failure?
Yeah,
I think it's. I'll throw in my 2 cents on this one, and I think here's what it is. I think when you find that happening at a table, that is a GM who is not confident in their skills as a GM and is afraid of anything going outside of plan too far. Like I've got a railroad, I've got a railway, I've got an idea for how this should go, and we're on that railroad. You guys bought a ticket when you sat down. Wait. You're going to do what? No. You can't do that. You can't jump off the train onto a horse, gallop ahead, and stop the train? What? No, that's not how this is supposed to go. I think a lot of it is there's a preconceived notion about what the resolution is or what the adventure is going to be and how it's going to be handled. And having characters with agency that come up with wild, crazy shit, instead of rolling with it, it's more of a, I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know. I think it's a confidence issue.
See, and I would agree with that, except, and this is where, to me, it's this idea of fear of the player character suffering a failure is so often that comes up in the same conversations where like, well, you need to be a fan of your player characters. You need to really support them telling their story. Okay, but Han Solo and Luke Skywalker's story was they fucking failed to notice the tracking device that led the Death Star to the Rebel Alliance's base on Yavin 4. Without that failure, there's no trench run. There's no use the Force Luke from a ghost. There's none of the tension of the third act of the fucking film.
I'm going to say that without one of the best lines in the entire trilogy came out of a failed persuasion roll while trying to infiltrate the Death Star.
What's your operator number? Boring conversation anyway. That one?
Yes.
I'll find out here. How are you?
How are you? Oh my gosh. Like, crit failed, double ones. I love you. I know.
Well, I mean, you could, I think there's this preconceived notion that winning is fun and failure isn't, and if you're not winning, you're not having fun. And I'm sorry, but that's just not a tabletop thing, or at least it shouldn't be.
Well, and I mean, we've had examples of it here on the show from Chris. You were running, was it War of the Dead? And the players are supposed to they're supposed to fail and get caught in a net.
Yep.
And none of your players did.
Nope. They all succeeded in their roles because it said, and that's one of those weird things where it's like, they can make an agility roll, but the whole premise of the part of the adventure is they get caught.
Yeah. How do they get caught if they have the ability to not get caught?
Exactly. So that was one of those where suddenly I had to improvise.
Well, it's also like the pre-printed adventure too. Like you're right in town. There's 4 guys that have been hung. Make a notice roll to see them in the middle of town square swinging from the ends of ropes. What?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have a problem with that, with a certain adventure that has that in it.
I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, I am perfectly fine that if the players have to fail, like in that they get caught in the net and they have to fail, to offer them a Benny to do so. I'm okay with just saying
do so. It's gonna happen, and you're getting a Benny. This is that what's Wiggy call it in the pulp handbook?
Complications.
Surrender.
Yeah. The surrender rule. It's the bad guy has a gun to the girl's head and tells you to throw down your guns, or you're all sitting at the dinner party in the Bond villain mansion, and lo and behold, everyone passes out from sleeping poison in the food. Or, everyone's caught under the net, and here's a Benny because things just got interesting.
Right.
Next scene.
Well, I'll often do this too. If I'm looking at something that's happening in the game, and a failure is much more interesting at that particular point, when a character fails the roll and they go to reach for their Benny, I go, hold on a second. I'll give you a Benny not to re-roll. Because I want to and it's part of, let's make this interesting, because this failure is a pretty epic failure. It's going to have repercussions and make the scene more interesting. The second part of that is I want to encourage players to embrace failure. It's a behavioral thing. It's an attitude thing. Embrace failure. I've got characters right now who won't spend a Benny, but they'll roll a failure. Go, I'm good with that. Because
one of them happens to be on the backside of my computer, jumping up and down that she's being talked about.
I didn't. I just raised my hand.
So, I mean, and the great thing when that happens is, nope, this is exactly what should happen to my character. They should fail this role. They don't have the skill to do this, and they're trying to do it under pressure. They should fail this role. No, that's the dice talking. We're going to let the dice tell the story. I'm okay with that.
Well, and I think there's an aspect of the Benny economy that plays into this. This goes to what I was saying earlier about where you can give out too many Bennies and put them in a position where if I've got 8 Bennies, I'm not failing this roll because I'll just keep spending them until I succeed. But at the same time, if you've been a little more tight with the Bennies, that gives you a lot more room to go. If you accept that failure and make things more interesting, I'll give you a Benny. Mm-hmm. If you're being a little more loose with the Bennies, you can still do it by offering them one of your GM Bennies. And then just explain to them, that means that I won't have them to spend for the NPCs.
Yeah, it's kind of like what's the word? It's a fate thing. Challenging what's it called? Starts with a C. I can't remember, but yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Saying, hey, your character has this hindrance, and in this situation, your character playing that hindrance is the worst possible thing that could probably happen in this scene. Here's a GM Benny. You don't have to take it, but if you do what I'm recommending your character would do, here's a GM Benny. I got one less to spend for my bad guys.
And I will tell you,
compel. Yeah, thank you.
It becomes a habit very quickly to the point it no longer requires the Benny bait. All of a sudden, the player who took the Benny bait the first 3 or 4 times that it was thrown out there is doing that in multiple sessions without it. It starts out, hey, I'll give you a Benny if because of arrogant you just jumped down the hole. Hey, I'll give you a Benny if you don't re-roll that, or I'll give you a GM Benny to not re-roll it. And then you get the player, 6 months later who's going, ooh, wait, no, I like this. I want to fail in this situation. And this is their reaction. And you start getting them thinking about the consequences of failure and they start taking that agency and that narrative control even in a failure. You know, it's great when we say, you just rolled all the raises ever. What's that look like? You just rolled a crit fail. What's that look like? You just rolled a regular fail. What's that look like? When you start giving players an incentive to hang on to the failure, or an incentive to do something, whether it's a Benny or it's, you know, narrative control, you're gonna get a lot more interaction of this type you're wanting.
Yeah, I would say too that you cannot be a confrontational GM,
Right.
or I mean, well, not confrontational, being antagonistic, like intentionally trying to beat the player characters down and make sure they don't win. There's a difference between challenging players and making something interesting because it's difficult versus it's impossible. And if you're trying to do it's impossible, then why? If there's not an answer to this riddle, why are you telling the riddle? There's like no point. Stop it. Knock it off.
At the other end of that, if you're worried about characters catching a case of the dead, there's a setting rule for that called Heroes Never Die. You can put that rule in place and never have to worry about there not being enough bennies on the table, or players having to save their bennies to avoid incapacitation. Because incapacitation's lost its teeth. They're just out of the scene. They become incapacitated and Heroes Never Die. They're going to come back. They don't need to spend that Benny in that situation if they don't want to.
Well, I'm gonna throw this out there too. In every role-playing campaign or session that I've ever been a part of, the most poignant moments, the ones that are remembered the most and talked about gloriously, are not winning battles. They're character deaths. And I'll give you the example from our Dead End game as a way to put this on a more brilliant, a more poignant scale. So we have a character who decides, basically we have a depressed character who's going to commit suicide, but wants to put on a brave face for the family and doesn't want to let anybody know about it. So they lure this one character across the woods to a house where they know the person who lived there abused sleeping medication. So the ruse is, we're going to go there because they have all this food and can. They have this great pantry and a lot of cooking supplies. It's going to be awesome. How about you escort me over there because I can't carry all this shit by myself? Great. That character goes along with it. And here's the thing. The player out of game and out of character went, I'm dead, guys. I won't see you again. I could see the writing on the wall. I know what this is, but my character would do it anyway. So they go sneak off. Sure enough, the NPC drowns a whole bottle of sleeping pills, dies in the woods, comes back as one of the undead. This player character tries to, give her final mercy by poking a stick through her eye, manages to do it, and then gets overrun by the undead because he decides, I'm going to drag her body back to camp because it's important that we get to bury her. And I'm like, okay, so strength roll dramatic task against vigor, and he got incapacitated from the dramatic task and died and became a zombie buffet. Mm-hmm. Now the fun part is the other player characters, Dave's character goes, hey, what happened to your mom, guy? Hey, let's go find out what happened to your mom. Tracks him through the forest, finds the body of the mother who killed herself, and goes, can I determine how she died? I'm like, sure, give me a healing roll. And he crit failed it. And he goes, turns around, there's a slight beat, and he looks at the other player character and goes, oh my God, he killed her. To this day, it's still a running joke 2.5 months later.
2.5 characters later, for the person who had died in that scene, it comes up. So I threw something in chat here from Carlin Kendrick that I really think we ought to hit on. He says every time he uses the I'll give you a Benny line, his players auto know because they're too afraid he's going to screw them over with a bad roll. So my joking answer to him is he needs new players. My serious answer to this is you need to build that trust with your player that a dice failure does not end up being screwed over. And I've talked about this before, just like we have varying levels of success, you can have varying levels of failure. A guy who misses his agility roll because he's trying to jump on the back of the train doesn't miss the train entirely necessarily. He just maybe takes a level of fatigue or bumps and bruises because of the way he lands on it. Or he doesn't jump on the ladder, but he catches onto the handrail and has to make a second strength roll to pull himself the rest of the way up. Or you can find a lot of different ways to handle what a failure means, and you can do it holistically in places where they're gonna fail, where you know the bennies have already come out and that you can see that look on their face. You don't have to wait for a time where you Benny bait them into it. You can do it on their natural failures that they're experiencing and slowly build that trust over time so that when you do offer them a Benny, they're far more likely to take it because they know on the backside of this is interesting, not horrible.
Right.
I've kind of experienced that too. And, you know, not to talk about a certain system that's just now going into its second edition, but a lot of the players that I have that come from Pathfinder really try to avoid any kind of dice roll in my games. Like, they don't take that kind of chance. And I think it's because the players that I've worked with that were in that system, they have everything set up and crunched in such a way so that everything is just bonuses. And I've seen the players there that were veteran players that would have like plus 20 on just standard rolls for everything. And with Savage Worlds, I like the randomness that you can succeed and you can fail, but it's impossible to set up that you will auto succeed or auto fail. Like, there is a chance you will and a chance you won't. You can't game the system completely.
Well, I'm gonna preface. I have a reaction to Carlin's question. So, what is that reaction where the player automatically assumes you're going to screw them over? Is that maybe your GM style? Maybe it's a learned response. I don't know. I mean, if you don't have the trust, here's the thing: you could be playing in the most gritty meat grinder setting, and if the players trust that you're not intentionally trying to kill them, but you're actively as a GM, like, you are dead. I've targeted you. The thumb of God is going to squish you to the ground. I'm going to see to it. You could preface that role by going, hey, you know what? A failure would be interesting here. It's not necessarily going to be deadly, but it would be interesting. So I'll give you a Benny not to reroll. I mean, you could preload that with transparency and go, I'm not trying to screw you over. I'm just trying to see if maybe this would be a little bit more interesting if you don't win this roll. It's not the end of your character. It doesn't result in character death. It's just interesting. So I don't know. It's a hard thing because you never know the psychology of the people you're playing with either. They can just be like, oh, no, I had a GM that did that to me once and he screwed me. I'm never doing that again. You know, like, you're arrogant. How about you put your weapons down and tell him you'll fight him with one fist tied behind your back? I'll give you a bet. Well, there's no way I'll win that combat. Right. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but it'll be damn interesting and a memorable moment in the story. It's okay to have that conversation with the player too. Like, yeah, I know it's not about winning. It's about telling an interesting story. You're not going to die, and don't worry, we don't respawn in this game. Don't worry about it. It'll be all right. So, do we have anything else left in the chat? Any unanswered comments, questions? Anything we haven't talked about when it comes to Bennies? I think we've hit the trifecta.
You know what? One of the things that I don't think we ever really talk about that much, and I've mentioned it in the past, high adventure, the setting rule. That lets you spend bennies to get a combat edge. And I think like the consistency that we got before was that actually slows down the game. But I feel like in some situations, like if you were going to go with a wuxia like setting or a high martial arts, that might be one of the setting rules you need to include. But it's effectively like you can spend a Benny to get any combat edge.
Yeah. Well, I would say that there's something that comes into this, right? So back to Carlin for just a second. If the player thinks they're going to be screwed over by a bad roll, don't call for rolls. Stop calling for so many rolls. If they're not challenged or under pressure and they have all the time in the world, there's no roll. They just succeed.
Yeah.
And that's a core thing, is I think too oftentimes players feel like they got screwed by a dice roll in a situation where it shouldn't have been a challenge. And you have to be careful that you don't put non-challenging things behind a dice roll. And pointing to, the D20 elephant in the room, since Dustin brought it up, where you get that plus 20 to something, it's because in those games, they never taught their GMs not to do that. So they actually had rules called taking 10 or taking 20, where a player could just automatically assume they rolled the best dice roll, or they had to get, all these bonuses to get past these common little things. And it's like, no, riding your horse from town A to town B does not require a riding roll. Riding your horse across a bridge that's on fire requires a riding roll.
Right. Yeah, it's like okay, well, so what does your character do? Well, I open the front door and go into the tavern. All right, give me a mechanics check to operate the doorknob. What?
Yeah, there is a point where you're just having too many dice rolls. With that said, I think there's a lot of interesting room there for things like the high adventure setting rule, and I've seen some others from other licensees. I can't think of them off the top of my head, where it's, spend a Benny for X or Y special effect, or an edge that only applies when you spend a Benny. An example of that would be one of the ways you can read Elan is that basically at any time you can drop a Benny for that bonus that comes from Elan. It's not just if you're dropping a Benny to re-roll, you get the bonus from Elan. No, you could just, I missed the roll by 2. Well, here's my Benny and I take a lot. You can do some interesting stuff where a Benny becomes these other things than what we're traditionally thinking of, the dice roll, the re-roll, or the soak roll. There's some other mechanics there. Again, though, be careful that you don't put something the players should already be able to do behind a Benny wall, because Bennies are a very finite thing that the players only get so many of. Even tonight where we were talking, you might limit them to 5 at a time, or they might get 8 to 10 in a night. That's still only 8 or 10 of them. So if you put too many things behind a Benny wall, then they've constantly got to be spending Bennies just to do the fun stuff.
Right.
And fun shouldn't always be behind a wall. Really big, maybe, but be careful with it. There's some great setting rules that do it, but take a really close look at the way they're written so you can see they're not putting something that should already be capable of behind them.
All right. Well, then, if we have nothing else in chat that we want to talk about, no other topic, more exploration on the topic, then we'll go ahead and close it down.
Agency, and I think that's an entire show topic. I don't think that's a closing comments conversation.
About what agency?
He says we're talking off a lot about player agency. Where's the GM's agency?
Oh, it's called Fiat.
Yeah, I was going to say that's GM Fiat, and I think that's an entire show about how to use it right.
Yeah, I think we've done that before.
Quite a bit, but yeah.
No, you can just announce the players all fall asleep, crash in there, and when they go, wait a minute, I didn't get a roll. Yeah, that's right. You don't get a roll.
You all wake up in your skivvies, tied on the side of the road with 2 wounds. But you all said you went to sleep with no one on watch, with other people in the building with you.
Strangers. Yeah, strangers you let into your base. Hey, maybe you should put somebody on watch and pull a notice roll. I don't know what to tell you. You just said nobody was staying watch. Nobody mentioned shit. So,
And on that note,
until next time, this is Jared Savage Daddy Gunning for Chris, Dave, and Dustin saying keep rolling and stay savage.